I didn't sleep for 5 days. Not really. A few minutes here and there, my body forcing itself to shut down from exhaustion before I woke up in a panic, heart racing, stomach twisted into knots. Emma was gone. Just gone. No messages. No calls. No explanations. At first, I told myself there had to be a logical reason. Her phone died. She lost her charger. She got caught up in something. But by the second day, logic wasn't helping. I called everyone, her friends, her sister, her coworkers. Nobody had seen her. Nobody knew where she was. Her boss told me she had taken the week off. The whole week. I stared at the email she had sent him. Perfectly normal, professional. As if this was all planned. But she never told me. Never mentioned a trip. Never hinted at needing a break. By day 4, the police didn't seem as worried as I was. Adults are allowed to disappear, they said. No signs of foul play. They asked me if we had fought. If she was unhappy. If she had ever left before. I told them no. But the doubt was crawling up my spine like cold fingers. What if she just didn't want to come back? That thought haunted me. Ate me alive. Turned me into something desperate and half-crazed. And then the doorbell rang. It was 2:17 in the morning. A time for bad news, for ghosts, for things you don't want to face. My body moved before my brain caught up, legs shaking as I pulled open the door. Emma stood there. She was barefoot, wearing jeans and an oversized hoodie, my hoodie. Her hair was a mess, her face streaked with tears. But her eyes weren't just sad. They were terrified. Her lips parted, her breath shaky as she whispered, "I can explain." I stared at her, my mouth dry, my heart hammering so loudly I couldn't think. The woman who had left me in limbo for 5 days was suddenly here, looking like she had been through hell. I should have pulled her inside. I should have hugged her, screamed at her, demanded answers. Instead, I heard myself say, too quietly, too calmly, "Where the hell have you been?" She flinched, actually flinched, like I had hit her. And then, before I could say another word, she threw herself at me, her arms locking around my waist, her body trembling. "I messed up," she gasped against my chest. "I messed up so bad, and I didn't know what to do, and I was scared, and I just, please don't hate me." I felt my arms move on instinct, holding her up because she was collapsing, her knees giving out. Hate her? I didn't even know what I was supposed to feel yet. I pried her off me, pushing her back enough to look at her face. "Talk," I said. "Now." She shook her head violently. "Not here. Please, let's just go inside." "I can't. Someone might see." That sent an ice-cold wave through me. Someone might see? Who? My grip on her arms tightened. "Emma, what the hell is going on?" Her breathing turned ragged. Her fingers dug into my shirt. "I swear, I'll tell you everything. Just not here." She was panicking. And it wasn't just guilt or shame, it was fear. I didn't move. I watched her, waiting for the truth to come spilling out, waiting for her to crack. But she just kept shaking her head, her eyes darting past me to the empty street like she expected someone to jump out of the shadows. Then, in the distance, a car engine roared to life. Emma gasped so sharply it sounded like she had been stabbed. Her whole body went rigid, her hands clawing at me. Inside, she begged. Now, for the first time in 5 days, she wasn't the only one who was scared. I pulled her inside and locked the door. I locked the door. Emma was shaking so badly that I thought she might collapse. Her fingers were ice cold as they clutched my arm, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I wanted to yell at her, shake her, demand answers, but there was something raw in her eyes, something primal. She wasn't just upset. She was terrified. I swallowed the anger clawing its way up my throat. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my voice low and steady. "The car. Do you know them?" She nodded. "Barely." "Who?" Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She looked like she was choking on her own words. I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "Emma, talk. Right now." She squeezed her eyes shut. I did something, Josh." Her voice was hoarse, wrecked. "I didn't mean to, I swear. She sucked in a shaky breath. "It got out of control." Something cold settled in my gut. What got out of control? She opened her eyes, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I cheated." It hit me like a baseball bat to the chest. For a second, I thought I misheard her. The words didn't make sense. Not after this. Not after 5 days of her being missing. After her showing up in the middle of the night looking like she had barely survived something. But she had said it. I cheated. I let go of her like she had burned me. She staggered back, clutching herself, her face crumpling. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to? My voice came out sharp, jagged. My ears were ringing. What the hell does that mean, Emma? You just fell into someone else's bed. Her whole body flinched, but I didn't care. Not anymore. You disappeared for 5 days. I hissed. 5 days? I thought you were dead. I filed a police report. I barely ate. I barely slept. I thought maybe I'd get a call that they found your body in a ditch. My voice cracked, rage twisting into something worse. And you were what? Off screwing someone else. She sobbed, shaking her head violently. It wasn't like that. I was... She covered her mouth, a broken sound escaping her lips. I was stuck. Stuck. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. What? Did you accidentally get locked in his apartment? Her breath hitched. Her hands trembled at her sides. Not his apartment, she whispered. His car. I went completely still. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the distant hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the house settling, the muffled sound of a car driving past our street. What? My voice was dangerously low. Emma's lips trembled. He wouldn't let me leave. The world tilted. My breath caught in my throat. What? Her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her own body together. It was supposed to be a stupid, meaningless mistake. I met him a few weeks ago. He flirted. I flirted back. It felt exciting. She squeezed her eyes shut like she couldn't bear to see my reaction. And then Friday night, I met up with him. In his car. Something dark slithered up my spine. She kept talking, her words tumbling out in a rush. I don't know why I did it. I don't know what I was thinking. But then, after I told him it was a mistake, that I loved my husband, that I was going home, she shuddered, took a breath, looked up at me with pure horror in her eyes. And he said no. My hands curled into fists. What do you mean he said no? She let out a broken laugh, but there was nothing funny about it. I mean, he locked the doors. He told me I wasn't going anywhere. I just stared. My mind couldn't process what she was saying. She swayed on her feet, gripping the back of the couch for support. He took my phone, drove me to some house in the middle of nowhere, told me I was his now, that I was going to stay with him, and that if I tried to leave... She trailed off, swallowing hard. I felt sick. Emma, are you telling me you were kidnapped? Her breath hitched, and then slowly she nodded. A violent shudder ran through me. I felt like I was going to throw up. 5 days. She had been gone for 5 days. And the whole time, I had been imagining her laughing in someone else's arms. While I couldn't finish the thought. I took a shaky step toward her. How did you get away? She flinched, looked down at her hands. I waited until he fell asleep. Her voice was hollow. I took his keys, and I ran. The realization hit me like ice water. That car, I said, voice sharp, the one that drove off just now. Was that? A knock, 3 loud, deliberate knocks, echoed through the house. Emma gasped. Her whole body went rigid. I turned toward the door. My pulse roared in my ears. Another knock, slower this time. Then a voice, male, amused, and way too calm. Emma. The voice drawled from the other side of the door. I know you're in there. I didn't think. I moved. My feet carried me toward the front entrance, my hands curling around the lock. Emma's fingers wrapped around my wrist like a vice. Her grip was desperate, almost bruising. Josh, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Don't open it. The house was dead silent, except for the knocking. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. It was slow, deliberate, patient. Knock, knock, knock. Emma's grip on my wrist tightened. Her nails dug into my skin, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. Josh, she whispered. Please, don't open it. My pulse was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to act, to do something. I glanced at the peephole. The outside light cast a long shadow across the porch. Someone was standing there. A man. Emma. The voice called again. Smooth. Almost playful. I know you can hear me. I turned back to her. Who the hell is he? She shook her head frantically, eyes wild with fear. He said his name was Ryan, but I don't know if that's even real. Josh, you don't understand. He's dangerous. Dangerous? My stomach turned. You mean violent? Did he? I stopped myself before the question could finish. Emma's lip quivered, and her gaze dropped to the floor. She didn't answer. That was all I needed to know. Knock. Knock. Then a quiet chuckle. I have to say, Emma, the man said, this is very rude of you. Running off like that? Taking my car? Another knock. More insistent this time. Come on, sweetheart. We had something special, didn't we? Emma let out a shaky whimper. Rage exploded inside me so fast I saw red. My body moved on its own. I grabbed the door handle. Emma threw herself against me, forcing me back. Josh, no. Don't let him in. I grabbed her shoulders, my fingers digging in. So what, we just let him stand out there? Let him play mind games? What if he tries to break in? Emma's face was pale as death. He won't. He likes control. He likes knowing we're scared. I clenched my jaw. Every muscle in my body was coiled, ready to destroy this guy if he tried anything. I turned back to the door. My hands shook as I unlocked my phone and dialed 911. Beep, beep, beep. No signal. I froze, stared at my screen. What the? Emma let out a strangled sob. He must have done something. He does things, Josh. He always seems to be 2 steps ahead. It's like he knows what you'll do before you do it. A chill ran down my spine. I switched to Wi-Fi. Nothing. I whipped around to Emma. Does he know where we live? She hesitated, then nodded. Did you tell him? Her voice cracked. No, I swear I didn't. He must have followed me, or a metallic clink cut through the air. My blood went ice cold. The doorknob. He was trying to open the door. My body moved on instinct. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy fireplace poker, and raised it. Get the hell away from my house. Silence. Then the slow sound of footsteps retreating. I exhaled sharply, my grip on the poker so tight my knuckles ached. Emma clutched my arm, her whole body shaking. The footsteps stopped. And then, in a voice so soft I barely heard it through the door, the man whispered, "See you soon, Emma." The sound of an engine roaring to life made Emma flinch. Tires crunched against the pavement, and then silence. I didn't move. Neither did Emma. We stood there, frozen, listening to the empty night. Finally, I exhaled. He's gone. Emma didn't respond. She was still staring at the door, her face ghostly pale. I turned to her. Call the police. Now. She swallowed hard. I can't. What do you mean you can't? Her hands twisted together. Josh, I don't think you understand who he is. My patience snapped. Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, you cheated on me with a lunatic and then brought him straight to our house. Emma flinched like I had struck her. Tears spilled down her face, but I didn't care. She did this. She made this mess. And now I had some psychotic stalker knocking on my front door in the middle of the night. I should call the cops myself, I said, voice shaking with anger. Emma went rigid. Her fingers dug into my arm, panic flooding her eyes. Josh, no. Please, you don't get it. He has connections. He knows people. If we involve the cops, it'll just make things worse. I stared at her. Are you hearing yourself right now? Emma, he kidnapped you. I know, she sobbed. But if we call the police, he'll... A notification popped up on my phone. My stomach dropped. Unknown number. You shouldn't have let her come back, Josh. Emma's breath hitched as she saw the message over my shoulder. She grabbed my phone, her hands trembling violently as she scrolled. More messages. Unknown number. You think a locked door will keep her safe? Unknown number. You can't protect her forever. Unknown number. She was mine first. The final message sent ice through my veins. Unknown number. See you soon. Emma made a choking sound and dropped my phone. Her whole body sagged, her knees buckling. I caught her before she hit the ground. I had been so angry, so betrayed, so consumed by the thought that she had chosen this man over me. But now I realized this wasn't over, and we weren't safe. Emma was shaking so violently I thought she might pass out. I gripped her arms, trying to steady her, but her body was limp, her breath coming in short, broken gasps. "Emma!" I snapped, shaking her slightly. "Look at me." Her eyes darted up to mine. Glassy, unfocused, terror-stricken. My mind was racing. Think, think, think. Some psychopath had been outside our house. A man who had taken her, trapped her, kept her for days. And now he was toying with us. Watching, threatening. And the worst part? She knew him. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I needed answers. "Now, sit down," I ordered, practically dragging her to the couch. She collapsed onto it, her body curled in on itself. I crouched in front of her, gripping the fireplace poker so hard my fingers burned. "Start talking, Emma. From the beginning. No more vague answers. No more secrets." She was silent, her lips trembling. "Talk," I growled. She shuddered, took a breath, and then, her voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I met him at the gym." I stiffened. He was just there one day. Friendly, charming, the kind of guy who makes you feel like you've known him forever. She laughed bitterly, wiping at her eyes. "He asked for my number." I said no. But then, a week later, he showed up at my coffee shop. Just casually. Said he was in the area. Said it was fate. My stomach twisted. I didn't think much of it. I really didn't. But then he started appearing more and more. Grocery store. Parking lots. Once, outside my work. Always coincidence. Always with that stupid, easygoing smile. She shuddered. And I fell for it. I thought it was harmless. I thought he was harmless. Rage burned through my veins. "So you just, what? Started seeing him?" She flinched. "No. I mean, yes, but not like that. It wasn't supposed to be anything. I thought it was just flirting. Just something stupid that didn't mean anything." Something inside me snapped. "You thought?" I hissed. "Emma, you're a grown woman, not a clueless teenager. You knew what you were doing." She started sobbing, burying her face in her hands. I know I was selfish. I was reckless. But I swear, Josh, I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to scream, punch something, break every single piece of furniture in this damn house. Instead, I forced myself to stay still. "Keep talking," I muttered. She sniffled, wiping her face. "That night, I met up with him. In his car. Just for a drive. I told myself it wasn't really cheating if I didn't." She choked on the words. "But the moment I got in, I knew I'd made a mistake. The way he looked at me, the way he locked the doors without even thinking. And then, after she stopped, my jaw clenched. After what, Emma?" She swallowed hard. "I told him I was leaving. That it was over. That it was a mistake. And that's when he changed. The blood in my veins turned to ice. His whole face just went blank. Like a switch had flipped. He leaned in, so close I could feel his breath, and he said, 'You don't get to leave.' A chill ran down my spine. Emma gripped her arms, her nails digging into her skin. He took my phone, drove me to some house in the middle of nowhere, said he'd always wanted me, that he'd been watching me, that this was meant to happen." Her voice cracked, and when I fought back, when I tried to run, he just laughed. Like it was a game. I felt sick. I begged him to let me go. She whispered. He just kept saying, "Not yet. Not yet." And then last night, when he finally fell asleep, I grabbed his keys and ran. I let out a shaky breath. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. "So he just let you escape?" I asked, voice tight. Emma squeezed her eyes shut. "No." He woke up. Goosebumps erupted across my skin. I was in the car, starting the engine, when I saw him in the rearview mirror. Just standing there, watching me. Her breath hitched, and he smiled. He didn't chase me. He didn't yell. He just smiled like he knew I wouldn't get away. I wanted to throw up. I stood up, running a hand over my face. My entire body felt hot with anger, cold with dread. "We need to go to the police." Emma shook her head violently. "Josh, please, we have to." I snapped. "This guy is psychotic. He kidnapped you, stalked you, and now he's threatening us in our own home." Her face twisted in anguish. "You don't understand. He's connected, Josh. He told me that if I ever went to the police, he'd make sure they never found me again." I exhaled sharply, my hands shaking. I had never felt so helpless, so completely out of my depth. Then, Emma's phone vibrated. She flinched. We both turned to the coffee table where it sat. Another vibration, another, and another. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. Her face drained of color. I snatched it from her hands. A new message. Unknown number. You left something behind. An image attached. I clicked it, and my heart stopped. It was a picture of our house, taken from outside. Emma made a choked sound. Her hands flew to her mouth. I shot to my feet, my pulse hammering. I grabbed the fireplace poker again and stormed toward the door. Josh! Emma yelped, lunging after me. I ripped the door open. Nothing. No car. No man. Just an empty street, quiet houses, and a suffocating blanket of darkness. I stepped out onto the porch, scanning the area, my breath coming in short, furious bursts. My skin was crawling, my body thrumming with adrenaline. And then a whisper, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Right behind me, too slow. A sharp, electric jolt of fear shot up my spine. I whirled around, swinging the poker, but no one was there. The front door slammed shut in my face. And then the locks clicked from the inside. For a full second, I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the locked door. My own goddamn front door. Then my brain caught up. Emma was inside. I lunged at the handle, twisting it violently. Locked. Emma! I pounded on the door. Emma! Open the door right now. No answer. A cold, sinking feeling coiled in my gut. I turned, scanning the darkened street, my grip tightening on the fireplace poker. My heart was a sledgehammer in my chest. Too slow. That whisper, whoever said it had been right behind me, right at my ear. And now Emma was locked inside. With him. I twisted the knob again, throwing my full weight against the door. Nothing. I took a step back, raised the poker, and swung it as hard as I could at the window next to the door. The glass shattered. I didn't care. I reached in, ignoring the sting as a shard sliced my forearm, and unlocked the door from the inside. The moment it clicked, I shoved it open and stormed inside. The house was silent. Too silent. My pulse pounded in my ears. Emma? My voice came out sharp, shaking. No answer. I gripped the poker like a weapon and moved deeper into the house. Every light was on. The living room was empty. The kitchen, untouched. The hallway, nothing. Then I heard it. A muffled whimper. From the bedroom. I moved fast, my legs eating up the distance between me and the door. It was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of light spilling out. I kicked it open. Emma was on the floor, her back against the bed, her knees pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to make herself as small as possible. Her whole body trembled violently, and standing over her, no one. The room was empty. I scanned the space, my entire body tensed, ready to fight. Where was he? The closet door was open. The bathroom door, too. No one. But Emma. Emma looked like she had seen a ghost. I dropped the poker and rushed to her. Emma, are you okay? I stopped. Finger-shaped bruises were already forming around her wrist. I saw red. Where the hell is he? I snarled. Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, tried to speak, but nothing came out. Emma, where is he? I demanded. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, panicked breaths. And then, barely audible, she rasped out. He was inside. The words sent ice through my veins. I shot to my feet, eyes darting around the room. Every corner, every shadow, every possible place he could be hiding. Nothing. Emma's breath hitched. He was right here, Josh, she sobbed. Right in front of me. I turned back to her, my pulse hammering. Then where is he now? She shook her head, her whole body still trembling. He just disappeared. I swallowed hard, my throat bone dry. What do you mean, disappeared? She let out a shuddering breath. I mean, 1 second he was standing there, staring at me, and then the lights flickered and he was gone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. A cold breeze slipped through the room. I turned. The bedroom window was cracked open. I stormed toward it, threw it open fully, and leaned out. The backyard stretched out into darkness. Nothing but the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. Then I saw it. Footprints. In the dewy grass. Leading away from the window. I scanned the yard. My breath ragged. Every muscle in my body thrumming with adrenaline. A flicker of movement. Far at the edge of the yard, just past the fence, stood a figure. Too far to see his face. But I knew it was him. He stood perfectly still. Watching. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. "You sick bastard," I muttered under my breath. Then he waved. Not fast. Not frantic. Slow. Mocking. Like this was a game. And then, without a sound, he turned and disappeared into the night. I stayed at the window, my fists clenched, my breath heavy. Every instinct screamed at me to chase him, to run after him and end this. But behind me, Emma let out a broken sob. I turned back. She was still on the floor, still curled in on herself, her shoulders shaking. I exhaled sharply and stepped away from the window, slamming it shut. I crouched in front of her again, placing a hand on her knee. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice to be steady. "We're gonna figure this out. You're safe now." I wasn't sure if I believed my own words. Emma lifted her head, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "No," she whispered. I frowned. "No?" Tears slipped down her face. "He's never going to stop," she said. And the worst part? I believed her. The weight of her words settled over me like a suffocating fog. He's never going to stop. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that there was a way out of this, that we weren't just helpless prey waiting to be hunted. But I couldn't, 'cause deep down I knew she was right. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. I stood up, running a hand over my face, my pulse still hammering from what just happened. "Emma, listen to me. We can't just sit here and do nothing. We need to fight back." She let out a weak, bitter laugh. "Fight back? Josh, we don't even know what we're up against." I clenched my jaw. "We know enough. He's a stalker, predator, and he's already gotten away with this for too long." Her hands twisted in her lap, her fingers digging into her skin. "You don't get it," she whispered. "This isn't just some random guy who took things too far. He plans things, Josh. He's careful. He made sure no one could track me. He made sure I had no way to call for help. And now he's here right outside our home and—" She swallowed hard. "And I think he likes this. The fear. The game. He's playing with us." I exhaled sharply, pacing the room, my fists clenched. She wasn't wrong. This wasn't some impulsive psycho acting on a whim. He had been stalking her for weeks, inserting himself into her life piece by piece, laying the groundwork, making sure that by the time he struck, she was already trapped in his web. And the worst part? He wasn't done. A thought slammed into me, cold and unforgiving. "He didn't hurt you," I said slowly, the realization settling in my gut like lead. Emma's gaze snapped to mine. "What?" I turned to her, my pulse hammering for a different reason now. "You were with him for 5 days, Emma. He kidnapped you. He took your phone. He kept you locked away. But he didn't—" I stopped myself, swallowing back the bile rising in my throat. "He didn't force you, did he?" Her breath hitched. She shook her head, eyes glassy. "No," she whispered. "He never touched me like that. He scared me. He made it clear that he could if he wanted to. But he didn't." I felt my hands tighten into fists. "Because that's not what he wants." Emma blinked, confused. I took a step closer. "He didn't take you to hurt you, Emma. He took you to break you, to make you afraid, to make you his." She let out a shaky breath, her fingers trembling. "Josh, stop. He let you go." I cut her off, my voice sharp. "Think about it. He didn't chase you when you ran. He could have found you before you even got here. But he let you come back to me." I exhaled slowly. "Because now I'm part of the game." Emma paled. A sick, twisted realization settled over me. He wasn't just obsessed with her anymore. He was playing with both of us. My stomach churned with rage. I was done being afraid. Done waiting for this bastard to make his next move. I grabbed my phone again. Still no signal. But there was another way. "We're going to the police," I said firmly. Emma's face twisted in panic. "Josh, I don't care how connected he is, Emma," I snapped. "This isn't something he can just make disappear. He stalked you. He kidnapped you. He broke into our house." My voice shook. "This isn't just some creepy guy following you around anymore. This is a crime. and I'm not going to let him win. Tears welled up in her eyes. What if it makes things worse? I crouched in front of her again, taking her hands in mine. Emma, listen to me. He wants us afraid. He wants us trapped. The only way we stop this is if we stop letting him control us. I squeezed her hands gently. We're going to the police. We're telling them everything. And we're going to put an end to this. She swallowed hard. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. I stood up. Pack a bag. We're leaving. She hesitated. Where will we go? A hotel, I said immediately. Somewhere public. Somewhere safe. We'll figure it out from there. She gave me a shaky nod and stood up, still unsteady. I walked into the hallway, grabbing my car keys, my entire body tense. I wasn't thinking about work, or my life before this, or even the fact that my wife had betrayed me. None of it mattered. Right now, this was my reality, and I wasn't going to let this bastard destroy it. I turned back toward the bedroom just as Emma emerged with a small bag. I'm ready, she whispered. I nodded. Let's go. We walked toward the front door. I reached for the handle. Then I froze. Something was there. On the floor. Just inside the house. A single Polaroid photo. I crouched down slowly, my breath catching in my throat as I picked it up. My hands shook as I flipped it over. And then my stomach dropped. It was a picture of Emma sleeping. In our bed. My heart stopped. My vision tunneled. I turned the photo over. Scrawled across the back in smeared black ink were 3 words. You took her. A shiver ran through my entire body. Emma gasped when she saw it. I shot to my feet, my chest heaving. My grip on the photo tightened until the edges crumpled. I stormed toward the door, yanked it open, and stepped outside. Nothing. But I felt it. Someone had been here. Maybe they still were. Emma hovered in the doorway, clutching her bag, tears streaking down her face. Josh, she croaked. I turned back to her, my hands shaking. I had made a mistake. I thought I had control. I thought I was making the next move. But no, he was still ahead of us. And now I knew exactly what he wanted. He wasn't just trying to take Emma. He was trying to take everything. A violent tremor ran through my body as I stared at the photo. The weight of it in my hands felt wrong. Too personal, too deliberate. My mind was scrambling, trying to piece together the impossible. Emma had been here for hours. She never left my sight. And yet, somehow, he had been inside. In our bedroom. Watching. Close enough to touch her. The air felt thick, suffocating. My stomach twisted into a sickening knot. Emma was gripping the doorframe so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Josh, she whispered, voice hoarse. What do we do? For the first time, I didn't know. I had told myself we had control, that we could stop this. That if we fought back, we could win. But now, I wasn't so sure anymore. A dull ringing filled my ears as I stepped back inside, shutting the door behind me with slow, measured movements. I locked it, bolted it. It didn't matter. He had already been here. A bitter, burning rage filled my chest, thick and smothering. I turned to Emma, forcing my voice to stay steady. We're leaving. Now. She nodded frantically, wiping at her tears. I grabbed my own bag from the hall closet. Just essentials, my wallet, my gun. We didn't have time to pack properly. We needed to go. I pushed past Emma toward the car. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop moving. Every shadow, every parked car, every flickering streetlight felt like a trap. I clicked the car key fob. Beep beep. We climbed in, slamming the doors shut. My hands were shaking as I shoved the key into the ignition and twisted it. The engine rumbled to life. I shifted into reverse, barely taking a second to check the mirrors before speeding down the street. We didn't speak. The air inside the car was thick with tension, heavy with everything left unsaid. I kept my eyes on the road, scanning every intersection, every turn, my body running purely on adrenaline. Emma's voice finally broke the silence. Where are we going? The police, I said firmly. I don't care what you think he's capable of. He broke in, Emma. He took a photo of you in our bed. We don't have a choice. She let out a shaky breath but didn't argue. She just wrapped her arms around herself, staring blankly out the window. My grip tightened on the wheel. Every time I thought about that photo, something inside me snapped. I didn't just want to run anymore. I wanted to find this bastard and end him. We turned onto the highway. The roads were nearly empty, just a few cars scattered in the distance. I pushed the speed limit, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Nothing. For the first time in days, I felt like we were one step ahead. And then headlights appeared behind us. Too fast. Too deliberate. My blood went cold. Emma stiffened. Josh. I pressed down on the gas. The car behind us matched my speed. Josh. Emma's voice rose in panic. I swerved into another lane. So did they. I sped up. So did they. The headlights were blinding now, flooding the car with harsh white light. And then the other car lurched forward, slamming into our rear bumper. Emma screamed. The force sent us skidding across the lane, the tires screeching against the pavement. My hands tightened around the wheel as I fought for control, my heart slamming against my ribs. The car behind us rammed us again. I cursed, yanking the wheel, narrowly avoiding spinning out. The adrenaline exploded through me, my mind moving 1,000 miles a second. This wasn't just a warning. He was trying to run us off the road. I gritted my teeth and did the only thing I could. I slammed the brakes. Hard. Tires screeched. The seatbelt dug into my chest as we jerked forward violently. Emma gasped in pain. The car behind us had been too close. They didn't have time to stop. Crash. The impact exploded through the car, metal crunching, glass shattering. The force sent us skidding to the side of the road, veering into the dirt shoulder. My vision blurred, my ears ringing from the shock. Then silence. For a long moment, I just sat there, panting, waiting. The headlights behind us flickered. The engine revved. And then the car backed up. I whipped around, heart pounding. The vehicle, an old black sedan, reversed down the highway at full speed. Within seconds, it disappeared into the darkness. And just like that, he was gone. Emma let out a broken sob. My entire body was shaking, my hands still clenched around the wheel. I forced myself to breathe. We were alive. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot that I sat there, gripping the wheel so hard my fingers ached, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The scent of burnt rubber and smoke filled the car. Emma was curled up in the passenger seat, her hands pressed against her mouth, her whole body trembling. Josh, she whimpered, voice barely above a whisper. He was trying to kill us. I forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat. She was right. This wasn't just stalking anymore. This was an execution attempt. And he had almost won. I turned in my seat, scanning the highway behind us. Nothing. Just an empty stretch of road. The black sedan had vanished, like a ghost slipping back into the darkness. Emma let out a shuddering sob. We have to get out of here. We're going to the police, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She shook her head violently. Josh, he's connected. He warned me. If we go to the cops, he'll know. I turned to her sharply. Emma, he just tried to kill us. Do you really think staying quiet is going to keep us safe? She inhaled sharply, her eyes wide and wet with terror. She wanted to believe me, I could see it. But the fear had wrapped around her like a noose. I didn't wait for her to argue. I twisted the key, forcing the car to start again. The engine struggled, coughing out a rough growl, but it came back to life. The damage wasn't enough to stop us. Yet, I pulled back onto the road, heart still pounding in my ears. 15 minutes. 15 agonizing minutes of silence, of flicking my eyes between the mirror and the dark stretch of road ahead. Then, finally, red and blue lights. The police station. I pulled into the lot and threw the car into park. Emma sat frozen in her seat, her fingers still twisted together, eyes darting nervously toward the entrance. Emma, I said firmly, we're doing this. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. We stepped out of the car. My legs felt unsteady, my entire body thrumming with leftover adrenaline. I wrapped an arm around Emma as we walked inside, my pulse hammering. The station was quiet, just a handful of officers behind the front desk. A bored-looking cop glanced up from his paperwork. Help you folks with something? I stepped forward. We need to report a stalking and attempted vehicular assault. His expression sharpened immediately. He gestured toward the chairs. Wait here. Within minutes, a detective was leading us into a back office. A no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tone. I'm Detective Morgan. Start from the beginning. I told her everything. Every single detail. Emma sat stiffly beside me, her face pale, her fingers twisting in her lap. I could feel her trembling beside me, but I kept talking. When I finished, Detective Morgan leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable. You said he calls himself Ryan? Emma nodded. Morgan exhaled through her nose. And you never got his last name? His real address? Emma shook her head weakly. He never told me. I clenched my jaw. But he's been following her for weeks. He broke into our home. He tried to run us off the damn road. You can track his car. Look at traffic cams. Check for any reports on missing women. Morgan held up a hand. Slow down. She tapped her pen against the desk, considering us. We can file a report. We can check nearby cameras and patrol your neighborhood. But without an official identity, it's difficult to make an arrest. I stared at her, heat rising in my chest. You're telling me there's nothing you can do? He kidnapped her. Morgan's gaze didn't waver. You said he let her go. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Emma let out a shaky breath. He thinks I belong to him, she whispered. And now he's after Josh, too. Morgan studied her for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, if that's the case, he won't stop. I sat forward. So what do we do? Morgan sighed, rubbing her temple. Right now, we file the report, put out an alert for the car you described, and recommend you lay low. No predictable patterns. No staying in one place for too long. If he's watching, he won't like unpredictability. Emma let out a shaky laugh. We're supposed to just wait for him to come back? Morgan's jaw tightened. If we find him first, you won't have to. I clenched my fists. It wasn't enough. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was a start. Morgan pushed over some paperwork. Fill these out. We'll put a patrol near your home in case he comes back. Emma swallowed hard but nodded. I grabbed the pen. My hand shook as I started writing. This bastard thought he was untouchable. Thought he could take what he wanted, play his twisted little game, and slip away into the dark whenever it suited him. But now he had the police watching. Me watching. And I wasn't going to stop until he was gone. We left the station just after 3 in the morning. The air was thick and heavy, pressing down on my lungs. The world felt off, like I was moving through a dream I couldn't wake up from. Emma was silent beside me, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at nothing as we walked to the car. Detective Morgan's words kept ringing in my head. Lay low. No predictable patterns. If he's watching, he won't like unpredictability. He wouldn't like it. Good. I unlocked the car, but Emma didn't move. She stood frozen on the pavement, her breath coming in slow, shaky pulls. I touched her arm gently. Emma? She flinched. I exhaled slowly. Come on. We need to get moving. She swallowed hard and nodded, but I saw the hesitation in her movements, the exhaustion weighing her down. She was barely holding on. I wasn't much better. I climbed into the driver's seat, forcing myself to focus. I had no plan, no real destination. The house was out of the question. The police had said they'd patrol the area, but it wasn't enough. He had already been inside. A hotel, then. Somewhere far enough that he wouldn't know where to look right away. I pulled onto the road, driving in silence. Emma kept her head down, fingers twisting together in her lap. She had been quiet before, but this was different. Like something inside her had snapped. Talk to me, I said finally, my voice rough. She didn't look up. What's the point? I tightened my grip on the wheel. The point is, I need to know what's going on in your head. Because right now, it looks like you're about to fall apart. A bitter laugh escaped her. Josh, I fell apart days ago. My chest tightened. We're gonna figure this out, I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. Emma turned her head toward the window, watching the empty streets blur past us. I don't think you understand, she murmured. You think we can stop him, that if we just play it smart, we'll be okay. I didn't like where this was going. She turned back to me, her eyes dark and unreadable. But we won't. Something cold coiled in my stomach. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because he's not afraid of us, Josh. He's enjoying this. I pressed down on the gas, gripping the wheel harder. I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want to admit that deep down I already knew she was right. This wasn't just about getting Emma back. This wasn't some impulsive obsession, some random act of violence. This was a game. And we were the ones being played. The neon glow of a 24-hour diner appeared on the side of the road. I made a split-second decision and pulled into the parking lot. Emma frowned. "What are you doing?" "We need a minute," I muttered, shutting off the car. She hesitated, then sighed and pushed open the door. We stepped inside, the sharp scent of coffee and fried food filling the air. A tired-looking waitress gave us a nod, barely looking up from her notepad. We slid into a booth in the back, away from the windows. Emma stared at the table, rubbing her temples. "This is pointless." I exhaled, trying to steady myself. "We can't just keep running with no plan, Emma. We need to think." She let out another bitter laugh. "You still think thinking is going to help?" Something inside me snapped. "Then what do you want me to do?" I hissed, leaning forward. "Just roll over and let him win? Let him take you again? Because that's what's going to happen if we don't figure this out." She flinched. I immediately regretted raising my voice. I rubbed my face, exhausted. "Emma," a chime rang through the diner. The front door swinging open. I froze. Something felt wrong. A figure stepped inside, moving toward the counter. A man. Tall. Too tall. I could only see the back of him. Dark hoodie, hands stuffed into his pockets. Calm. Emma tensed across from me, her entire body locking up. Her fingers dug into my wrist. "Josh," she whispered, voice raw with terror. I didn't look at her. I was already looking at him. The man shifted slightly, just enough that I caught a glimpse of his face in the reflection of the diner's front window. My blood ran cold. It was him. He didn't look at us. He just stood there at the counter, tapping his fingers absently against the surface, like he had all the time in the world. Emma's grip on my wrist tightened. "What do we do?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer, but for the first time since this nightmare started, I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't hunting us anymore. He was already here. The world slowed. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out the low hum of the diner, the faint clatter of dishes, the static-filled radio playing some old, forgotten song. He stood at the counter, completely at ease, hands still tucked into his pockets, head tilted slightly to the side, fingers drumming against the polished surface in an infuriating, lazy rhythm. He wasn't looking at us. Not yet. But he knew. He knew exactly where we were. Emma's grip on my wrist was vice-like, her fingers digging in so hard I was sure they'd leave bruises. Her breath came in short, silent gasps. Her body pressed so far back against the booth that she looked like she wanted to disappear. "Josh," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "We need to go. Now." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because I was staring at him. At the man who had taken her. The man who had broken into our home. The man who had just tried to kill us. And now he was here, close enough to touch. A slow, creeping rage spread through my veins, burning hotter with every passing second. I had spent days running, trapped in a cycle of fear, of helplessness. But not now. Not anymore. I exhaled sharply, forcing my body to stay still. My every instinct screamed at me to move, to act, to end this. But he wanted that. He was waiting for it. Emma was still frozen, still gripping me like I was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. She was terrified, and that's what he wanted. For us to be afraid. For us to feel powerless. I took a slow, deliberate breath and did the one thing he wasn't expecting. I reached across the table and grabbed Emma's hand. Her eyes shot up to mine, wide and desperate. I gave her a single, firm nod. "We're walking out of here. Together." Her breath hitched. She glanced back at him, then at me. "Josh, he's right there." "I know," I muttered. She swallowed hard. Then slowly she nodded. I slid out of the booth first, keeping my movements calm, controlled. I pulled Emma up beside me, my hand wrapped around hers. We turned toward the exit. And then, just as we passed the counter, he spoke. Low, amused. "Leaving so soon?" Emma flinched violently. I stopped. Couldn't help it. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to keep walking, to get us the hell out of there. But my rage was louder. Slowly, I turned my head to him, and for the first time I looked directly into his eyes. A smile. Subtle. Playful. Like this was all just a joke to him. And God help me, I wanted to wipe it off his face. He studied me with mock curiosity, tilting his head. You seem tense, Josh. Long night? Emma was gripping my arm so tightly I could barely feel my fingers. I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay even. You should leave. His smile widened just slightly. Oh, but I just got here. A beat of silence. The waitress, completely oblivious, set a cup of coffee in front of him with a tired smile. Here you go, hun. He nodded in thanks, then wrapped his fingers around the cup, completely unbothered, like we weren't even a threat, like he had already won. I exhaled sharply and turned away. Emma hesitated for a fraction of a second, then followed me. Step by step, we moved toward the door. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. We weren't running. We weren't reacting. We were just leaving. We stepped outside. The cold air hit me like a slap. I pulled Emma toward the car, my heart racing. Get in, I muttered. She didn't argue. She yanked open the door, scrambled inside, and slammed it shut. I moved to the driver's side. My hands were still shaking as I gripped the wheel. I started the engine. The car rumbled to life. And then, just as I was about to pull out of the lot, I saw him, standing just inside the diner, staring out through the window, watching us. His lips moved. I couldn't hear him, but I didn't need to, because I knew exactly what he had just said. See you soon. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires screeched against the pavement as we tore out of the parking lot, my entire body burning with adrenaline. Emma was shaking beside me, staring straight ahead, her breath uneven. Josh, she whispered. He let us go. I gritted my teeth. No. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel. He's just getting started. The road stretched out in front of us, dark and endless. My hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles ached. The weight of Emma's silence pressed down on me like a vice. She hadn't spoken since we left the diner. Since we left him. Her hands were twisted in her lap, her breath shallow, her body still trembling. I kept my eyes on the road, scanning the highway, watching the mirrors. Waiting. But there was nothing. No headlights in the distance. No shadow lurking in the dark. But that didn't mean we were safe. It just meant he wasn't done yet. Emma let out a shaky exhale. Josh, she whispered. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because I was still too angry. Angry at him. At how easily he had inserted himself into our lives. How he had played with us like we were nothing but pawns in his game. But I was also angry at her. For letting him in. For giving him a way in. For making this mess in the first place. I could still see him in that diner, calm, relaxed, completely in control. He wasn't afraid of us. He wasn't worried. Because to him, we weren't a threat. We were just entertainment. I gritted my teeth, my pulse hammering. He thought he had control. He thought he was winning. But I was done playing his game. Emma shifted in her seat. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, I muttered. She let out a weak laugh, but there was no humor in it. There's no such thing anymore. I ignored her. We needed a plan. The cops had filed a report, but it wasn't enough. I didn't trust them to protect us. And I sure as hell wasn't going to sit around and wait for him to make the next move. I needed to be ahead of him for once. I needed to end this. I pulled off the highway onto a quieter road, weaving through the back streets, keeping my eyes sharp. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew we needed to get away from predictable places. No hotels, no obvious stops. A cheap motel came into view. A rundown place on the edge of town, off the radar. It would have to do. I pulled into the lot and shut off the engine. The world fell into silence. Emma swallowed hard, glancing at the flickering neon sign. Do you think he's still following us? I flexed my fingers against the wheel. I don't know, but I'm not taking any chances. We climbed out of the car, moving quickly. I grabbed the bag from the back seat, keeping my head on a swivel. A bored-looking man sat behind the front desk. He barely glanced up as I handed over some cash and took the key. No names. No questions. Perfect. We made our way down the dimly lit hallway, every nerve in my body still on high alert. Room 107. I unlocked the door, pushing inside first. Checked the bathroom, the closet, the window locks. Clear. Emma hovered by the entrance, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked exhausted. I let out a slow breath and shut the door, bolted it. For the first time in hours, we were alone. Safe. Or at least as safe as we could be. Emma sank onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. What do we do now? I didn't answer right away, because I knew what I was going to do. I just wasn't sure if she could handle it. I walked over, crouching in front of her. Emma. She lifted her head. Her eyes were red, swollen. I gripped her hands tightly. You need to sleep. Get some rest. I'll keep watch. Her fingers trembled against mine. Josh. I mean it, I said firmly. I won't let anything happen to you. Her breath caught. She nodded slowly. She didn't ask what I meant. Maybe she already knew. I waited until she lay down. Waited until her breathing slowed. Until the exhaustion finally dragged her under. And then I stood up. I moved silently, grabbing my bag, pulling out my gun, checking the magazine. One bullet was all I needed. One chance. Because this wasn't going to end with another police report. This wasn't going to end with us running. This was going to end with me finding him first. And putting a bullet in his head. I sat in the dark, gripping the gun, my mind racing. The room was silent except for Emma's slow, unsteady breathing. The soft glow of a single bedside lamp cast long shadows across the walls. Outside, the world felt still. Too still. But I knew better. I knew he was out there. Somewhere. Watching. Waiting. My fingers flexed against the gun's grip. I had never killed anyone before. Never even considered it. But if it was him or us, it was going to be him. I reached for my phone. Still no service. I wasn't surprised. He had been cutting us off from the start. Making sure we were isolated, trapped in his web with no way to call for help. I glanced at Emma. She had curled into herself on the bed, her face twisted in restless sleep. I had no idea what nightmares she was seeing behind her closed eyes, but I knew they all had the same face. I exhaled slowly. I had to end this tonight. If I waited, he'd strike again. He was getting bolder. The diner had proved that. He wasn't lurking in the shadows anymore. He was stepping into the light, playing with us openly, because he thought we couldn't stop him. I was going to prove him wrong. I stood up, my decision made. I wasn't waiting for him to make the next move. I was going to find him first, and I was going to kill him. The night air hit me like ice as I stepped outside. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few scattered cars under dim, flickering lights. The sky stretched above me, dark and endless, the stars barely visible. I scanned the area. Nothing, but I could feel it. The weight of his presence. The invisible eyes watching. I wasn't afraid anymore. I checked my gun, slid it into the waistband of my jeans, and started walking. I didn't have a plan. I only had instincts. And my instincts told me that if I wanted to find him, I needed to stop thinking like his prey and start thinking like a hunter. I moved quickly but carefully, cutting through the alley beside the motel, scanning the dark corners, listening for movement. My pulse was steady, controlled. I wasn't running. I was hunting. A shadow flickered in the distance. I stopped. The faint glow of a cigarette flared in the dark. And then a voice. Low, calm. Brave move, Josh. It was him. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I didn't let it show. I took a step forward, my muscles coiled. Ready. You've been following us for days, I said. Breaking into my house. Stalking my wife. And now you think you can just walk into a diner and smile at us like it's a game? He took a slow drag from his cigarette. A small chuckle. It is a game, Josh. You're just mad because you're losing. I snapped. I lunged forward, slamming him into the brick wall behind him, my forearm pressing hard against his throat. His cigarette dropped to the pavement, embers scattering. For the first time, I saw his face up close, and I hated how normal he looked. He wasn't a monster with hollow eyes and scars. He wasn't some deranged lunatic foaming at the mouth. He was just a man who had nearly destroyed my life. His lips twitched into a smirk. Now, he murmured. That's not very neighborly of you. I pressed harder. Give me one reason I shouldn't kill you right now. His smirk widened, and then he laughed. A low, taunting sound that sent rage burning through my veins. Go ahead, he whispered, his breath warm against my face. Kill me. Do it. I gritted my teeth. My hands itched to pull the trigger. To end this. To end him. But then his eyes flicked past me, and his smirk turned into something else. Something cruel. My stomach dropped. I turned Emma, standing there, barefoot, eyes wide, face pale as death. I froze. She shouldn't be here. She should be inside, locked in the room, safe. What the hell are you doing? I shouted. She took a slow step forward, then another, and then she spoke. But not to me, to him. Ryan, she whispered. My blood ran cold, because she hadn't said his name in fear. She had said it like she knew him, like she had said it 100 times before. I turned to her fully, my pulse roaring. What did you just say? She didn't answer, because she was still looking at him. And he was grinning. My stomach turned. Emma, I said again, my voice raw. What the hell is going on? She tore her eyes away from him slowly. Her face was twisted in something unreadable. Regret, guilt, and something else. Something I didn't want to understand. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Josh, she whispered. I'm so sorry. A sharp pain exploded in my ribs. I staggered back. Ryan's fist. He had slammed it into my side while I was distracted. I gasped for air, my vision blurring. The ground tilted. I saw Ryan step forward, his face still calm, still mocking. And I saw Emma still standing there. Not running, not screaming, just watching. As if she had expected this. As if she had let it happen. Darkness crept at the edge of my vision. The last thing I saw was Emma reaching for his hand. And holding it. Then everything went black. Pain. That was the first thing I felt. A deep, blinding pain in my ribs, throbbing with every shallow breath I managed to take. Then came the cold. I was lying on something hard, concrete. My cheek pressed against it, rough and unyielding. My limbs felt heavy, useless. I forced my eyes open. Darkness. My vision was still swimming, but I could make out shapes. A dim, flickering light. Concrete floor. And then footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. I clenched my jaw and tried to move, but my body wouldn't cooperate. My head spun violently. My hands tied. A voice. Smooth. Casual. Mocking. Welcome back, Josh. A chair scraped against the ground. Someone sat down. Ryan. I tried to lunge at him, but my body barely responded. Pain flaring through my ribs. A sharp chuckle echoed through the empty space. Easy now, Ryan murmured. Wouldn't want you passing out again. That would be no fun at all. I sucked in a shaky breath, my pulse roaring in my ears. My wrists burned where the zip ties bit into my skin. I forced my head up, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. It was a basement. An empty, goddamn basement. I recognized nothing. No windows. Just cement walls and a single door. A single way out. And then I saw her. Emma. Standing just behind Ryan. Her arms crossed over her chest. Her face tight with emotion. My stomach twisted. She looked at me, but she didn't move. Didn't speak. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching me like I was something pathetic. You look disappointed, he said, smiling slightly. You shouldn't be. Emma here? She's the reason we're all together tonight. She made this happen. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. Liar, I growled. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Am I? I turned to Emma, my chest burning. Tell me he's lying. She inhaled sharply. Didn't answer. My stomach dropped. She couldn't even look at me now. I forced myself to sit up, the movement sending a violent stab of pain through my ribs. Emma. My voice was low, trembling with something I didn't want to name. What did you do? Her arms tightened around herself. Josh, she stopped, closed her eyes, took a deep breath. And when she opened them, she looked guilty. She looked broken. But she didn't look innocent. Ryan stretched lazily, letting out a satisfied sigh. See, Josh, you've been thinking about this all wrong. His eyes glowed with amusement. You've been treating me like some obsessed stalker, some monster hiding in the dark. He smiled wider. But the truth is, Emma and I, we go way back. Something inside me shattered. My breath caught. My body locked up. Slowly, I turned to her. Her face said everything. Ryan laughed. There it is. That moment of realization. God, it never gets old. I stared at Emma, pleading. Tell me it's not true. Her lips trembled. Josh. Tell me it's not true. I roared. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm sorry. My whole body went numb. Ryan leaned back in his chair, watching the wreckage unfold in front of him. Emma and I were together long before you ever came along, he mused. And she never really got over me. Did you, sweetheart? Emma flinched. I felt sick. She wasn't a victim. She was part of this. That first night in his car, I said slowly, realization crashing over me like a tidal wave. It wasn't an accident. Was it? Emma squeezed her eyes shut. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. But it did, Ryan interrupted, his voice gleeful. And now look where we are. Cold, bitter laugh escaped me. It sounded wrong. You set me up? I muttered, my head spinning. Emma took a step forward. Josh, no, Shut up. She flinched violently. Ryan grinned. Careful now. That almost sounded threatening. My chest heaved. I had spent days thinking I was protecting her. That she was being hunted. That she was the victim. But she had led him to me. She had chosen him. I turned to Ryan, my rage boiling over. You should kill me now, I spat. Because if you don't, I swear to God I'll make you regret it. He studied me, amused. Oh, I don't want to kill you, Josh. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I just want to take everything from you. His fingers brushed against Emma's wrist. And she didn't pull away. The knife in my heart twisted. You already did, I whispered. A silence fell. Ryan smirked. See? Now you're catching on. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My whole world had just collapsed. And there was no coming back from this. Ryan stood up, stretching. Well, I think that's enough fun for one night. He turned to Emma, nudging her gently. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home. Emma hesitated. She turned to me one last time. And in her eyes, I saw something real. Guilt, regret. A small, flickering ember of the woman I thought I knew. But it wasn't enough. She reached for Ryan's hand. And together they walked away. The door slammed shut. I was alone, tied up, beaten, left to rot in the dark. My wife was never mine to begin with. And the worst part? I never even saw it coming.